now it's my distinct pleasure to start the evening tonight by introducing someone who needs no introduction, Chelsea Clinton.
Thank you, John, for that introduction to all of us here. It is such a joy to have the chance to introduce someone whom I think once you read her book will realize she also equally needs no introduction. Reading Yael's book, realized that she had given those of us who have been lucky enough to know her, to love her, to work with her, and to learn from her, such a gift in that we now know even more about her than we otherwise would have. Because in some ways, what now is itself meditation. It's her sharing an intimate look into a process that has come to mean so much to her, has helped her become the remarkable person that she is, and one that she believes could be of benefit to anyone, anywhere, at any moment in our lives. So in some ways, I was left with this deeply selfish impression that I hope all of my friends write books so that I can learn more about them, learn how they think about their own stories, learn what has been valuable and important to them, kind of learn what they value in a personal and in a universal sense. And one of the remarkable things about Yael is that those are the same for her. And what she values for herself is very much what she values and hopes for all of us. It just has been such a joy to get to know Yael, to become mothers together, and to just continue on this journey with one another. And I didn't expect to conclude on this note, but I look over and I see my mother's book, It Takes a Village. And I think it has just been such a gift to me to be part of Yael's village and to have her be part of my village. And I am so thankful that you all came to hear her tonight. And because this is a book signing, I just want to echo what John said. Please buy 1 or 3 books. I think particularly in this season of reflection and gratitude, What Now is just a perfect companion to this moment of the year, kind of this moment in our country's history, and in whatever moment we each may be navigating in our own lives. So please just join me in welcoming my friend, my colleague, someone I am really proud to now call my fellow author, and someone I admire and respect so very, very much. Yael.
So I want to first thank you, Chelsea. I wrote here, you are my inspiration as an author and a mother and really a person who lives every single day of her life asking, how can you make the world better? And then you do it with so much grace and kindness. And I'm really also very grateful to know you, and thank you so much. I also want to thank John Turner and the bookstore as serving as an amazing co-sponsor for tonight's event, to thank Dr. Mark Weiss and the Student Affairs, NYU Student Affairs Office also for co-sponsoring tonight and really believing in me and supporting the work we do at Mindful NYU and creating a home and support for wellness and well-being for thousands of students, faculty, and staff, and providing the food as well. So really, really thank you, Mark. Mark's going to help me with some of the questions and answers at the end. And along the lines of constantly being a source of support for wellness and well-being on campus, I really want to thank Dr. Linda Mills, who has been my inspiration, mentor, friend, hero for my entire adult life, really. My very first boss out of law school, and just somebody who lives life with boldness, with vision, and always pushing the envelope of what can be done in one human life. And so thank you, Linda. Thank you so much for being here today, but also just for being amazing. I want to thank the staff of Global Spiritual Life, who bring everything to life. Ariel Ennis, Rekha Prasad, Emily Mervosh, and big thanks to Isabel Calkins, Fabrice, who's here, Fabrice Schwen, Jay Carey, who's incredible, and Julia Matthews, all of whom are here and helping tonight. I want to thank all my family and friends. I look out today and see people from just all, students from all parts of life and people I don't know, and just grateful to be here with you all tonight. I'm really, really grateful to be here with you. Thank you. And most of all, finally, I really want to thank my husband, Ben, who this entire book would not exist without him holding down the fort, giving me wisdom, editing every single word and page, making jokes so that I wouldn't cry too much during several rewrites. And I feel like my entire self wouldn't exist without him, Ben, so thank you, Ben. I love you. Okay. There are some seats. There is some seats up here if people want to sit. So you're welcome to come up now. I'm going to lead us in a very short meditation to start. So if you want to just get comfortable in your seat, if you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes and just allow yourself to rest. Allow yourself to fully arrive. If you're standing, do your best to stand and relax into your posture. Releasing the day, releasing everything that happened today, releasing the tension in your shoulders, softening the muscles of your face. Taking a few breaths, moving through the body, starting at the very top of the head. Releasing the muscles of the face and the jaw. Releasing the shoulders. Feeling a slight lift in the spine so that you can feel almost as if a tiny thread is being pulled from the top of your skull, moving upwards. And then you can feel that tension, that very gentle, dynamic tension between settling into the seat and being pulled upwards towards the sky. Soften the area around the chest and the heart. Soften the back. Relax into the chair if you're standing, into your posture. Soften the muscles of the stomach, the lower back. Feel the place where your bottom connects with the seat. And just release anything you don't need right now into the seat, and then let it go into the ground. Relax your legs. Notice what your legs are touching. Notice the feeling of your legs. Notice if they feel tired from carrying you around all day. Notice the textures of the chair, of your pants. And then go down further, all the way down into your ankles and your feet. Feeling once again the textures of your shoes, the connection with the ground, the sense of rootedness and connection. Move through the entire body, releasing anything that's willing to be released, softening and opening. Feeling the aliveness of your breath and the movement of your chest and belly. And just for these few moments, really noticing you're alive right now. You are being kept alive by the world. Feel yourself being breathed by the world. Nothing you have to do. Just be here with your breath and your body. Thank you all. Thank you so much. So I am going to start the reading tonight from the place of where I first started meditating, which is in college at NYU many years ago. It was quite a different place then. But maybe those of you that are students, you might hear some parts of your own story in my story. During my junior year of college at New York University, I ducked into a clothing store on Broadway and 13th to find some quiet as I dialed my friend Sasha. "I can't breathe again," I said in short gusts as my chest constricted. I felt lightheaded and dizzy, and I was covered in a cold sweat. I was having a panic attack, my third that month. Sasha told me to focus on what was in front of me. "Touch the clothing," she said. "How does it feel?" "Soft," I responded, still struggling with my shallow breath. "What do you notice in the store?" she asked. After describing my surroundings to her for the next 20 minutes, my breathing finally calmed down. I broke down in tears of gratitude and exhaustion. "Yael," Sasha told me gently, "you have to get help." The next week, I nervously attended a workshop on anxiety that I had found through the university's health center. The facilitator mostly talked about the stress of classes and homework and exams. And I thought to myself, stress about homework? The word stress seemed to fall so short of capturing what I was feeling. Homework was about the least of my worries. I was stressed because I wasn't sure if I would ever find love or if love was even real. Earlier that year, my parents had announced they were getting a divorce after 35 years of marriage. And earlier that month, my long-distance boyfriend had broken up with me because of what he called other temptations. It's very sad. I was stressed because I had taken out tens of thousands of dollars in loans to attend college, and I had no idea how I would pay them back after graduation. I was stressed because on September 11th of that year, more than 2,000 people were killed less than 15 minutes from my residence hall. The world felt like it had gone insane. Despite having friends, I felt lonely. Despite doing well in my classes, I felt exhausted and burnt out. I was experiencing more than just stress. I was deeply, existentially anxious. I was hungry for instruction and guidance on how to be, not just how to take deep breaths. I wanted to live a good life. I wanted to love and be loved. I wanted to make a difference, and yet I felt I didn't have any of the right tools for any of this. My mother, noticing my state, gave me a flyer for a 7-day silent meditation retreat in upstate New York. I thought it sounded nice, like a relaxing spa vacation. I was picturing jacuzzis and massages. Turned out it was nothing like a spa vacation. It was 7 days of complete silence. We could ask questions of the teachers, but otherwise even eye contact was discouraged. We practiced sitting and walking meditation all day long. In the evening, the teachers gave talks about mindfulness and something everyone kept referring to as the practice. I cursed and cried my way through the first 3 days. The meditation was physically excruciating on my back and knees. I could not get comfortable. Unable to talk to anyone, I felt completely alone. Moreover, I continued to fail miserably at the practice. I could not pay attention to my breath for more than 10 seconds at a time. I couldn't pay attention to my food after the second bite. My mind was self-recriminating, anxious, panicky, and my body hurt everywhere. At night, I devised elaborate escape plans wherein I would hotwire one of the cars in the parking lot and then drive off into the woods where I was sure that life would be better than at the meditation center. On the third or fourth day of the retreat, it was finally my turn to meet with one of the teachers. When I pictured this during the days prior, I imagined I would ask some very deep philosophical question about the meaning of life and my place in it. Instead, as soon as I sat in front of him, I burst into tears. I feel afraid all the time, I heard myself say. That's it. That's all I seemed to want to say after days in silence. And it was true about not just the time on the retreat, but my time at home. I felt afraid all the time. The teacher paused for a minute and then said, "You know, the interesting thing about fear is that it doesn't like the light. The more you bring a flashlight to your deepest fears, the more they won't be able to survive." I skipped the next period of meditation and walked down to the creek. Sitting at its edge, I concentrated on breathing slowly, and I imagined shining a small flashlight into my insides. "What are you afraid of?" I asked myself, and waited to see what the light beam would reveal. That I'm ugly, that I'm stupid, that nobody loves me, that nobody will ever love me, that I'm a disappointment. Also war, terrorism, environmental disaster, apocalypse. I tried all these fears on for size, and while partially true, none felt like the whole truth. None quite resembled the kernel of fear in my gut that was causing so much grief. I'm afraid of dying. Now I was closer. I was afraid of dying, but I had never died. How could I be afraid of something that hadn't happened to me yet? What did I imagine dying to be? No longer existing, being worthless and empty to the point of invisibility. And there it was, the feeling of being invisible and worthless. That was the core fear I carried with me without knowing it. The foundation of pain on which an entire shaky structure of identity was built. I knew this was only the beginning. It would take years of meditation and exploration to unpack this core fear. But my teacher was right. Meditation provided a steady light to shine on my anxieties and a container in which I could examine them. I felt lighter during the rest of the retreat. My mind settled and the tension in my body eased. I felt broken open and simultaneously entirely whole. The original title of this book was Broken and Whole, but the publishers thought that was stupid. And they improved it. I was never a star meditator. I have never been naturally relaxed, present, or particularly spiritual. For most of my life, I have been a jumpy, anxious, neurotic mess. I offer my story to you because I have come to believe that any happiness and freedom I've experienced has come from within the mess, not from overcoming it. Everything I ever hated about myself, everything I tried to get rid of, has turned out to be the rich soil of my liberation. My neediness, my anxiety, and my anger have all been manifestations of my capacity for intimacy and connection. My traumas have softened my heart and enabled me to understand a little better other people's pain. Freedom, for me, comes not from changing myself, but from growing ever more expansive and loving towards all the darkness within. What now is a question we're forced to return many times in our life, but it takes on a particular urgency in our 20s and 30s. No matter the circumstances that brought you here, there's no better moment and no better time to create and sustain a meditation practice for yourself than right now. Your unique messes contain the seeds of everything you need. They hold within them real love for yourself and others. They contain the path to healing and to liberation. By returning to who you are in meditation, by deeply understanding your emotions, your suffering, and your interconnection with the larger world, you water these seeds. Eventually, they break open, revealing your strong and vulnerable heart, able to hold all of your pain and all of your joy. So I'm going to read one other section. I think I have time for one other section. And this is the section on social media. So I talk about a lot of stuff in here. I talk about emotions, strong emotions, particularly focusing on anger, fear, and desire, as those are some of the big three that came up for me a lot in my 20s and that I see coming up in our students through our Mindful NYU program. And I talk about mindful relationships, how to bring mindfulness and meditation into your relationships, how to bring it into your relationship to social justice and to social change. And then I talk about social media. If you're a millennial between the ages of 18 and 36, you probably spend an average of 18 hours a day consuming media, with approximately 5 hours of that time engaged in social media and peer-created content. That's what the research says. I reach for my phone at nearly every pause in the day, from the moment I wake up to the moment I fall asleep. Our phones are extensions of ourselves, connectors to others, portals to the world, and addictive tools. If we're going to take the goal of living a mindful life seriously, we have to consider our very intimate, ubiquitous relationship with our devices. I'm going to skip this section on what I didn't make this up, but it's called the endless scroll. The time we spend kind of endlessly scrolling down feeds. And I'm going to go to this section called Comparing Mind. One of the dangers of too much social media is engaging in what the Buddhists call comparing mind. This is exactly what it sounds like. Comparing our lives, our looks and achievements, and even our meditation abilities to others to see how we stack up. Everyone engages in comparing minds sometimes, but in the world of social media, where people only publicize the rosy moments, the filtered photos, and the happy news, it is particularly easy to think we are the only ones having a hard time. I remember one particular day of college when I made the mistake of looking up a young woman with whom I was planning a conference. Even though this woman was only a few years older than me, I found hundreds of articles she had written, awards she had won, and other accomplishments staring at me back on the screen. I took a breath and looked up my own name. Tears streamed down my face as I compared it. Nothing, nada, no results whatsoever. I am a nobody, I remember thinking, my comparing mind in full force. I will never be as accomplished as this woman. I will never amount to anything. I carried around this dreary view of my worth all day, long after I shut down the computer. Comparing mind starts from a place of insecurity. It rests on an assumption of deficit or lack, I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, and then looks to the outside world to prove or disprove that original false assumption. If I'm better looking than Lily, then I'm good looking, the logic goes. If I've achieved more than Jim, then I'm successful. The trouble with comparing mind is that resting on that shaky foundation, it is never satisfied. It never successfully answers the question of whether we are lovable or successful. Even if we come out on top in one particular comparison, there's always someone who seems to have or be more than us. Additionally, even if we were deemed the best looking, the most lovable, the most successful by others, when the affirmation comes exclusively from the outside world and is tied to our sense of self, we suffer. The self, the person we think we are, separate from other beings, is completely interpenetrated with everything else in the universe. Its very nature is instability and impermanence. When I recognize this, how can I take credit for the good things that I do, since the I am constantly being influenced by the people and landscapes around me? How can I compare myself to anyone else in this world when every force in their universe and every force in my universe come together in different but interpenetrating ways? Selfing, or the project of continually trying to reify a separate, permanent, unchanging self, is a delusional concept that I find myself trapped in over and over again. It's a way the mind constricts, and it leads to suffering. It hurts. In many ways, it also lies at the heart of social media, where we're all continually branding ourselves, polishing our images, curating our lives, and then comparing ourselves to the brands of others. Sometimes, to break out of comparing mind on social media or when looking around the room at a party, I ask myself, what if I'm okay and enough right now? What if the only standard I have to live up to is my deepest, most authentic self? One of my favorite Jewish Hasidic stories is of a rabbi named Zusha. It happens to be the name of my son. Not coincidence. This Rabbi Zusha was crying and distraught on his deathbed, and his students asked him why, reminding their teacher of all the wonderful deeds he had done over the course of his life. Rabbi Zusha replied, I'm afraid that when I get to heaven, God's not going to ask me, why weren't you more like Abraham? Or why weren't you more like King David? God's going to ask me, why weren't you more like Zusha? Why wasn't I more like Yael? When I get lost in a sea of measurements and comparisons, I try and return back to that central question. Wise consumption. Lodger Rinsler talks about checking email. He's a Buddhist teacher and an author. Talks about checking email and using the devices the same way he talks about drinking alcohol. Alcohol, like phones, email, social media, sugar, is not inherently bad or good, he says. It just is. And realistically, it's a part of many people's lives, especially those in their 20s and 30s. How do we relate to both alcohol and technology? How we relate to both alcohol and technology is what matters. Do we consume these things in unhealthy amounts? Do we ingest them first thing in the morning or last thing at night just before we close our eyes? Can we use these platforms without losing our awareness, giving ourselves time to process our emotions, feel our loneliness or our boredom? Can we limit our time wasted online? Can we resist the constant comparing of ourselves to others? The first step in mindful technology consumption is to pause and recognize the power the devices have over us. To check in with ourselves before we reach for them. I find that moment before the reach holds a lot. What's there that I can't sit with that's making me want to reach for my phone? If we can build in that pause, that break, and that emotional rehab when it all becomes too automatic, too addictive, and too much, we will greatly improve our lives and release our suffering. So, I think we'll stop there and take a minute to maybe open it up to a little bit more discussion, questions, and then if we run out of those or we have some time, maybe we'll close with a short meditation. So thank you all so much for listening so far. And I want to introduce Dr. Mark Weiss, who is my boss and mentor, and I'm really grateful that you're here. And he's going to help sort of moderate the questions. And John has the microphone if anybody has anything, questions, things that came up for you, anything you'd like to add.
Great. So it's great to see everyone here. Terrific. And thank you for your comments. And it's interesting, when I heard Yael talk about the chapter during her undergrad days at NYU, all I can tell you is what's in this book works, because she's an absolute superstar today and now. So from the NYU days, that evolving process, whatever magic sauce is in the book, get it, use it, apply it, because there's real evidence here that it works. We are so lucky to have her here at NYU. So with that being said, I'm just going to moderate questions. John's going to play Phil Donahue, for those of you old enough to remember Phil. Anyone want to ask the first question of Yael? Right over here.
How has becoming a mother affected, your mindfulness, and whether or not this book would have been written differently, if you were in a different place in life?
Everybody hear that? He said, how has becoming a mother affected your practice of mindfulness, and how might it have been different if I was in a different place in life? Thank you for that question. I think it's interesting because I actually wrote half the book very pregnant or on maternity leave, so it was on my mind a lot. And I think I was writing mostly from the perspective, for people in their 20s and people going through those kinds of changes, but in so many ways, all of life is transitions and changes, and I was going through a major transition with my first baby during the writing of this book. And I think it just sort of maybe forced me to try and be really honest, because I was just filled with so many hormones. It would have been clear if I was faking it or trying hard not to, and I was feeling really emotional all the time. And so I tried to just tap into the most honest thing I can say and put it all out there. And then I think since having a baby, one of the things that's so amazing, now he's 1, and actually today for the first time ever, he started walking, which is very exciting, yeah. And I think it highlights, it sort of flashes a highlighter on how crazy my mind is all the time, because my son is always present. He's always there. He's figuring out the world, learning about the world, being curious and wanting attention. And if he doesn't get it, eating garbage or eating electrical cords or something. And so he requires so much attention and so much focus. And so I think a lot of being a mother has kind of showed me how much my mind is usually flying around, reaching for my phone, looking at emails, and then kind of forcing me to then walk the walk, be present, stay with the unfolding moment, which is my son coming into this world and exploring the world. And so he's been definitely one of the best teachers of my life. I guess that's the beginning of it. It's a great question that I have not actually been asked before, so thank you.
Perfect. We would like to ask the next question. And I'll paraphrase it. Okay.
Hi. Oh, hi. We were talking about the mindful consumption and comparing brands. There's a lot of pressure for college students and young professionals to like own their brand and create their brand for themselves. So how do you balance doing that and creating your brand and being tuned in, but then also with the mindful consumption?
So the question is, how did essentially Yael develop her own brand within the context of mindful consumption?
It's such a good point. So, we are often told this is an important thing to kind of stake who you are and sell yourself, and there's nothing essentially wrong with that, for sure. Like Mark just said, I have to do it. They definitely wanted me to do it to sell the book, and I think even if we take it away from the brand language in college, we're all trying to figure out who we are as separate beings and what our authentic voice is. And that's all that is. That's all that branding is. And that's not a bad thing. In fact, it's an incredibly important sort of developmental thing. At the same time, and when I teach to college students, one of the first things I say, and I do it during orientation when people first come in the building, is that the more that we can do that work of crafting who we are, of figuring out who we are, while holding a loose hand on what that actually becomes in the world, the easier it's going to be. So the story that I'll tell it very quickly, is that there are two waves traveling in an ocean, a little wave and a big wave, and the big wave can see all the way to the shore and the little wave can't. The big wave sees that every single wave before it crashes when it gets to the shore, and realizes they're going to the shore, they're going to crash, and starts freaking out, starts crying, is really upset about this. And the little wave is saying, what's going on? I can't see. What's going on? Why are you crying? The big wave says, if I told you, you'd be so upset. The little wave says, just tell me. And the big wave says, okay, every single wave before us got to the end of the shore and crashed. We're headed in that direction. We're going to crash. And it's horrible. It's like the worst news ever. It's very depressing. And the little wave thought for a little bit and then said, I know I can give you, 7 words why this is not a problem. And the big wave said, what are they? And he said, you're not a wave. You're not just a wave. You're water. And the idea of this is that, and I added the just. I learned about this actually from an incredible writer and teacher named Jay Michelson, who's here today. And I know that, I think he heard about it from Ram Dass. So it's an amazing story. And what the point of it is that it's important that we see our waves. Every wave is different, and we each have a unique configuration, and we each exist in our own way, and it's beautiful, and it's important to learn to love the wave that you are. And at the exact same time, not like separately, not parallel, but at the same time, we are all water. We're literally made of water, but we're also made of forces that are constantly interpenetrating and breathing in and out with each other, thoughts, ideas, scientifically connected to one another. And so the more that we can, continue, build our identities and our brands while understanding that they're at the very same time completely connected to everything else. In my mind, it's like very relaxing because you don't get as attached to the outcome. The process is part of the journey. Yes, thank you for that question. It's a really good question.
Terrific question. Who's got the next wave? Next wave coming in. In the middle there, Kristen.
Hello. I have a question about what instigated the book. I think, a lot of us, in life you have ideas and feelings and thoughts, but my question for you is, what was it that finally tipped the scale that made you say, okay, that's it, I'm writing a book?
I got, actually somebody from the Parallax Press had written something else that I had read something else that I'd written and reached out to me and said, like, do you want to write this? And she said something, do you want to write something? And I guess I had just, when I was in college, I felt like I would have really liked someone to help me out. I did read a lot of the Buddhist books that were out there, but at that time there was not a lot written for my demographic, which was somebody in my early 20s, and not speaking to those direct experiences that I was having. And so it always kind of kept in my mind that I really wanted to just try and see if some of the things I went through could be helpful to other people, that what they were going through. And so I put together a proposal, and she rejected it like 6 times, and finally, like a year goes by, and she finally says, okay, we can work with this. And then through amazing magic of an amazing editor back and forth, and the rest of the book, that I wrote the rest of the book, but that's sort of the trajectory that I went on.
Terrific. And while we're looking for another question, I wanted to ask something. Talked about 20-year-olds. Can an old dinosaur glean anything from the book? Is it just limited to 20-odd? There are some people that look not nearly as old as me, but older than 20. Can they get anything from the book?
I think so. I definitely...
Give us some hope.
Definitely. And I think that a lot of the examples that I use are from my current life, and I'm no longer in my 20s. And I think we can keep making changes. We can keep rediscovering new things for our entire lives. And some of my best teachers in life were all older and constantly growing and changing. So I think there's things in there for everyone, for sure.
Keep hope alive. All right, up to you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
What would you say to someone who says that you can't practice mindfulness and also be like a Christian or practice their own religion?
So the question is, how do you reconcile people saying how can you practice mindfulness while being a Christian at the same time?
Yeah,
Or
practicing
not?
your own religion.
Practicing your own religion.
Yeah.
It's a great question. And from my personal, so I first started meditating actually in a Jewish meditation context. And so all of my teachers were Jewish, and many of them were rabbis. And there's always been, at least in my tradition, people that feel like that's inappropriate. And then there's a lot of people that are finding within their own religious tradition, including Judaism, including Christianity, including many of the religions that are out there, that there's already mindfulness practices built into the religion. So right there in the heart of it, there's practices about being present, there's practices about opening up and touching something that could be called God or the divine. And I've heard beautiful talks. We actually at NYU over the last couple of years have hosted different talks from different religious leaders who have either brought meditation into their communities or have discovered the practices that are already there. And it's opening up many doors into the faith. For me, it was really like a total revitalization of my relationship to my religion. I've never left Judaism, but it made Judaism feel like it came alive. It made it feel like it was, it helped me to have a more sophisticated relationship rather than, for me, what was essentially a little bit of like a childlike relationship of thinking like God is like a nice dad in the sky that I ask for things. It became more of like I started to see in the heart of the prayers, in the heart of the holidays, in the heart of pretty much everything I was doing was this profound opening to these other truths. it doesn't mean that I think that every religion is this at the heart of it the same. And I actually really appreciate the wisdom that Buddhism, in my experience, the way that it has like sort of mapped the mind in its precision. And that's really bringing that to Judaism has really helped my Judaism, but I wouldn't say it, with that degree it was already there. I don't think it was. But then I think Judaism has stuff to offer that is not in Buddhism. So I think that there's room, and I've seen many teachers of many faiths find that room for either the living in both faiths or in finding the mindfulness within their own tradition.
Great. Time for one last question. Right here in the front. Sorry, John, for making it hustle back and forth. You should have just had it in the front. All right, here we go.
I want to follow up on the mommy question. How old are your kids going to be when you teach them and sit them down and teach them how to do mindfulness and meditation? And how will you approach it? I teach kids in school, and I'm curious about how you approach it.
So he's wondering, at what age will Yael's kids be before she starts introducing them to mindfulness and teaching them meditation?
I don't know. I guess it really depends on what they're like, because right now I can't imagine they have anything to learn from me about it. They are this one's not existing yet in a human form, but my son is such a teacher of mindfulness in his entire being. But I know, actually, with your work, Professor, that you bring mindfulness to high schoolers, elementary schoolers, everyone. And I would have died for that when I was young. The anxiety I was talking about did not start when I was in college. I was an anxious kid. I was having a lot of panic and fears growing up. And so I think it's a very helpful practice, and just to figure out who you are and to touch into that place. And I know people like yourself and many other people out there are specializing in bringing these practices to schools. And from what I can understand, they are really, really profoundly helpful. And so I think it can help a lot of people at a lot of ages, but I don't think we're quite there yet. My son is like a lunatic, but he's 1. Yeah.
Oh, you'll get there. Yeah.
not quite just there yet. Thank you.
So thanks for these great questions. Thanks for coming out tonight. We still have plenty of food left, so feel free to mill around. And Yael is going to meander behind the table, and we would love for you to purchase. John, we want to sell double these books, right? Double? All right, so that's the goal for tonight. Thank you, everyone, and thanks again to Yael for a great book. Thanks, everyone.